The house stood at the edge of the forgotten road, its windows hollow like sockets of an old skull, watching every traveler pass with a quiet hunger. Few dared to step close, and even fewer returned with memories that made sense. Tonight, under a sky that looked bruised and swollen with storm clouds, the protagonist approached its rotting porch, driven by a need they couldn't explain. A cold wind slipped through the broken doorframe as if the house exhaled in anticipation. The moment their foot crossed the threshold, the air tightened, dense and heavy, pressing in with a strange awareness. Something old and patient stirred in the darkness, as if waking from a long, satisfied sleep. The floorboards creaked beneath their steps, not from weight, but from something shifting just beneath the wood, something that seemed to crawl closer each time they blinked. A faint whisper drifted through the hall, soft at first, then clearer, forming their name with a voice that did not belong to the living. The shadows lengthened on their own, stretching toward the center of the room like fingers reaching out. That was when they realized the truth too late. The house hadn't been abandoned at all. It had simply been waiting. Key point number 1 describes the moment the protagonist arrives at the abandoned house, but beneath the surface, this moment is much more than a simple entry into a creepy location. The arrival marks the beginning of an unseen contract between the protagonist and the house itself, a subtle shift from the known world to a realm where logic thins and the supernatural begins to breathe. As the protagonist walks toward the structure, the atmosphere grows unnaturally still, as if the outside world is holding its breath. Every detail begins to feel sharper, the groan of the weathered gate, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the whisper of wind pushing through narrow cracks. Even the faint scent of mold rising from the wood feels oddly intentional, as though the house is trying to introduce itself. This arrival isn't just physical, it's emotional and psychological, drawing the protagonist into a strange, magnetic pull. They don't fully understand why they came here, only that something tugged at them, an odd curiosity mixed with the kind of dread that settles deep in the spine. The way the house stands, leaning slightly forward, gives the impression that it has been waiting for this exact moment. The windows, clouded with dust, reflect no light and instead seem to drink in the darkness around them. The protagonist hesitates for a moment, feeling a prickling sensation on the back of their neck, the unmistakable instinct that they are being watched. The feeling intensifies with every step closer, as though unseen eyes shift behind the walls. Once the protagonist reaches the porch, the air changes again, becoming heavy and inexplicably colder. The boards beneath their feet creak in a slow, deliberate rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. The protagonist tries to rationalize the unease, convincing themselves that old structures always behave strangely, but something deeper in them knows that this house is different. There is an ancient awareness here, something that feels just awake enough to notice their arrival. When they place their hand on the door, the wood feels unnervingly warm, as if something inside has body heat. The door opens without resistance, too smoothly for its decayed appearance, suggesting it has been used far more recently than it should have been. This moment marks the crossing of a threshold that is not meant to be crossed casually. The arrival becomes a point of no return, a quiet invitation accepted by merely stepping inside. The protagonist senses, in the smallest flicker of intuition, that the house had been expecting them, and with the door closing behind them on its own, the arrival becomes the first step into the house's carefully crafted trap. Key point number 2 focuses on the unsettling moment when the walls begin whispering the protagonist's name, a turning point that transforms ordinary fear into something far more intimate and invasive. The whispers do not begin loudly or dramatically, instead, they slip into the silence like threads of cold air, faint enough to be dismissed at first. The protagonist assumes it must be wind seeping through cracks in the wood or perhaps the shifting of old pipes, but then the sound forms a shape, a cadence, a familiar syllable that sends a tremor through their chest. Hearing their own name drifting from the walls creates a sensation unlike any ordinary haunting. It feels targeted. It feels aware. The protagonist pauses, straining to catch the sound again, telling themselves they must have imagined it, but the whisper grows slightly clearer, brushing against their ears from somewhere behind the plaster. It is neither male nor female, not quite old or young, but a voice that feels constructed for them, built from their own memory of how they think their name should sound when spoken gently. The effect is deeply personal, as if the house has learned something about them in a span of seconds. The protagonist's fear sharpens into confusion, then into a quiet terror that pulses beneath every heartbeat. They begin to move cautiously through the hallway, pressing a hand to the wall, feeling the coldness of the surface and half expecting something to press back from the inside. The whisper follows them, growing louder when they try to ignore it, softening when they freeze. This strange responsiveness convinces them that whatever is speaking is not a residual echo trapped in the house but a conscious presence that listens and reacts. The whispers shift from their name to fragmented phrases, too distorted to fully understand but filled with a tone that suggests coaxing or luring. Some moments, the whispers sound almost comforting, as if trying to draw the protagonist closer to something hidden, while at other times they carry a darker resonance, heavy with warning or threat. The protagonist realizes they are not alone, but the presence is not walking beside them or lurking in rooms, it is woven into the structure of the house itself. Every beam, every plank, every nail feels inhabited, as though the house breathes and speaks through its own skeleton. This discovery pushes the protagonist into a heightened state of awareness where every whisper makes them question their sanity and reality. They cannot tell if the house is trying to guide them toward something or slowly unravel them from within. The sense of being watched intensifies, not from a single direction but from all sides, as if dozens of unseen eyes observe from behind the walls. The whispers continue in a steady rhythm, no longer random but purposeful, and the protagonist understands that the house is not only aware of them but deeply interested, turning their name into a key meant to unlock their fear layer by layer. Key point number 3 centers on the cracked mirror that reveals a shadow standing behind the protagonist, creating a chilling moment where reality bends just enough to show something the eyes are not meant to see. When the protagonist discovers the mirror, it is not hanging proudly or placed deliberately, but leaning against the corner of a dim room as though someone once tried to discard it and failed. The glass is fractured in thin, web-like lines, each crack catching the faint light and breaking the reflection into jagged fragments. Despite its damaged state, the mirror draws the protagonist closer with a strange pull, as if inviting them to look deeper than their own reflection. Standing before it, the protagonist notices that the room behind them in the mirror appears slightly darker than the real one, the corners more shadowed, the edges blurred as though the mirror reflects not the present moment but a version of it altered by something unseen. As they observe their own reflection, the air around them feels heavier, thick with an expectation they cannot explain. Their heartbeat quickens when a shape begins to form behind their mirrored self, at first only a smear of darkness, then a tall figure with no defining features. The protagonist's breath catches, and they whip around, expecting to confront an intruder, but the room is empty, its silence so absolute it only amplifies their terror. Turning back to the mirror, the shadow remains, standing impossibly close behind their reflection. It does not move or sway, it simply exists in a way that feels older and more patient than anything human. The cracks in the glass distort its outline, creating the impression of something that shifts subtly each time they blink, as though the mirror struggles to contain an entity far too real for its frame. This moment shatters the protagonist's final layer of doubt. The strange events are not tricks of imagination or natural creaks of an aging house, something within these walls has form, presence, and intent. The shadow's stillness carries a suffocating weight, a silent communication that needs no words. It is not merely watching, it is waiting. The protagonist feels a cold sensation creeping up their spine, an instinctive awareness that the shadow in the mirror is studying them with the same fascination the whispering walls displayed earlier. They reach out with trembling fingers, touching the surface of the mirror, expecting only cold glass, but instead the surface seems to pulse faintly beneath their touch, almost like the slow rhythm of a heartbeat. The reflection flickers, and the shadow leans closer in the mirror though it never moves in the room itself. This impossible difference between what is seen and what is real becomes a horrifying revelation. The mirror is showing the truth of the house, a truth hidden from the naked eye. The protagonist understands then that whatever haunts this place does not just lurk in darkness, it watches from every distorted angle, waiting for its moment to step fully into their world. Key point number 4 revolves around the sudden appearance of a door that had never existed before, a door that opens into a room filled with the belongings of people who vanished long ago. This moment marks a deeper descent into the house's shifting reality, where space itself bends to reveal secrets it has guarded for decades. The protagonist first notices the door when walking down a hallway they had already passed through moments earlier. The corridor feels subtly altered, the air colder, the shadows longer, and the silence somehow heavier. When their eyes land on the unfamiliar door, a chill runs through them. It is not old like the rest of the house. Its wood is untouched by rot, its handle uncorroded, as though it has been freshly crafted. The protagonist tries to convince themselves they simply overlooked it before, but the truth presses against their mind like an unwelcome thought: the door was not there until now. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, they grasp the handle, finding it strangely warm, like living skin. The door swings open without a sound, revealing a room bathed in a muted, grayish light that seems to emanate from no single source. Stepping inside feels like entering a sealed memory. The air is thick with stillness, heavy with stories left unfinished. Shelves line the walls, each one holding objects that shouldn't be together: rusted pocket watches, children's shoes, faded letters, torn clothing, cracked glasses, and yellowed photographs of people whose faces have been blurred or scratched out. Every item radiates an unsettling sense of ownership, as if they belong to individuals who once stood where the protagonist now stands. The protagonist slowly scans the room, recognizing that these are not random artifacts, they are remnants of the missing people who entered the house and never returned. Each object feels charged with sorrow and something darker, as though the house has taken more than just physical presence, it has devoured memories, identities, and the emotions tied to them. A faint humming fills the room, not mechanical or musical but more like the low murmur of distant voices trapped beneath the floorboards. The protagonist feels a pressure building in their chest, a dread that deepens with every step further inside. As they move closer to the center of the room, they notice a small wooden box placed on a pedestal, untouched by dust. Its pristine condition makes it stand out among the aged relics. The protagonist hesitates but eventually opens it, revealing an item that freezes their breath, a belonging unmistakably theirs, an object they lost years ago and never recovered. The realization crashes over them with paralyzing clarity. The house had not just prepared this room for the lost souls of the past, it had been preparing for them as well. The room is not a memorial, it is a warning, a glimpse into the fate that awaits. Key point number 5 centers on the protagonist's devastating realization that the house does not trap people randomly, it selects those burdened with hidden guilt, drawing strength from the emotional wounds they try to bury. This understanding dawns slowly, weaving itself through every unsettling moment experienced inside the house, until the truth stands undeniable. The protagonist begins to notice patterns among the relics found in the hidden room, items connected not just to the vanished individuals but to events marked by shame, regret, or unresolved wrongdoing. Each artifact seems to hum with a quiet, lingering pain, and the protagonist feels this echo resonate within their own chest. The house is not simply haunted, it is a living entity that feeds on guilt like a parasite roots into a wound, drawing nourishment from the deepest, most unspoken parts of the human psyche. As the whispers intensify and the shadow in the mirror seems to watch more keenly, the protagonist starts to feel their own past pressing forward. Memories they have tried to suppress rise to the surface with alarming clarity. The house seems to reach into their mind, tugging at threads of regret, turning them over, examining them, and amplifying the emotions tied to them. The protagonist realizes that the house is not attacking them randomly, it has sensed something within them the moment they crossed the threshold. It recognized the weight they carried, the guilt buried beneath layers of denial, and it has been feeding on that emotion, growing stronger with each passing moment. Every hallway becomes a reflection of their internal struggle, every whisper a reminder of what they would rather forget. The protagonist feels increasingly exposed, as though their thoughts and memories are being peeled open for the house to consume. The chilling truth sets in: the previous victims were not simply unlucky wanderers but individuals who entered with a dark piece of themselves unhealed. Their belongings in the hidden room were not trophies but residues of guilt the house had drained from them until nothing remained. This revelation forces the protagonist to confront the unsettling possibility that there may be no physical escape. The house has no need for locks or chains when it binds its victims with their own unresolved sins. The realization becomes suffocating as the protagonist senses the house closing around them, not with walls but with the echo of their past tightening like a grip. They understand that the only true entrance was the moment they allowed their guilt to fester, long before stepping inside. Now the house simply finishes what had already begun. The protagonist must face the truth that the house's hunger is not for their body but for the guilt anchored deep within their soul, and that is the very thing they may never be able to outrun. Anyone chosen by the house, and in that instant, the protagonist understands they have already been claimed.